I want to talk about stress a lot today because I feel like, all the things that we're doing to keep our bodies in check, so to speak, the workouts and the eating, this is all really cool and really nice. But then I feel like there's a lot underneath that. So we can try to fix things with like perfect eating and all that kind of stuff. But if we don't address the stress part, then the other results are really difficult to get, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that all the time, especially I think with women who really want to lose weight. When we don't have stress and we don't have sleep and we don't have just our well-being and balance, I feel like it is both really hard and often those things are going to make getting results almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm so excited to talk about it. So why don't you tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Laura Gouge. I'm a naturopathic physician currently in Portland, Oregon, and I've been in practice for about 7 years. For the last 3 years of that, I've been the medical director for a mental health clinic here in the area. So everybody that I've been working with has had some sort of mental health complaint, most commonly anxiety, depression, and then usually mental health complaints that are exacerbated by underlying chronic stress. So I also work with people who have physical complaints because I feel like it's rare that our bodies exist. We aren't separate systems. So usually people with anxiety are also going to have physical complaints like digestive issues, IBS, headaches, chronic pain, things like that. So I work with people with a vast array of symptoms, but usually something going on in the mental health realm. And I also work with people virtually because I know not everyone has access to a naturopathic doctor, so I will consult with people who live in other areas too.
Yeah, this is so important. Actually, just a couple of episodes back, or was it even the most recent one that I did with with somebody who helps people with like not neuroplastic pain. So that another important topic, right? Like the body, like mind, basically. If there's something going on in one area, the other one does not affected. It will be affected, right?
Exactly. And it's amazing how often when we get our stress really in like a good place, often things like pain will start to get better.
Totally have experienced that. It's a lot of people don't believe it, but it is. They just go hand in hand. So when people come to you and then they complain, they have IBS or whatever the issue they might have, do they realize that it is related to stress, or they often don't?
I think it depends. Sometimes people do use the word stress or they use the word anxiety, and other times people use words more like I'm feeling really overwhelmed or there's just a lot going on, or I'm feeling like they're feeling a sense of intensity. Because what is stress though? It's just our bodies are reacting to some sort of demand that's being put on us. And so usually people are coming in complaining about the demand itself, whether it's their job or a relationship or their kids or something physical that's going on in their health. So I feel like it depends. Sometimes people use the word stress, and a lot of times it's not as conscious yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are the main forms? I mean, you mentioned a couple of them, work and family and all that kind of stuff. What are some forms of stress that people don't necessarily even think about? Oh, that could be stress too, but it really is.
Yeah, well, whenever we have something that's going on that's putting a demand on our system, so I think the biggest forms are going to be transitions. So when we're losing a job, changing a job, I mean, sometimes they're even positive stressors. Like
Yeah.
we were just talking before we started recording about moving. Moving can be a really big stressor, even though it might be a positive. More negative things might be losing a loved one, going through a divorce, experiencing a chronic illness, or maybe having somebody that you love have an illness where you're a caregiver for them. Physical things can be stressful. So it can be just about anything. And we can also experience good stress, like exercise is a great example of it, something that's stressful to the body, but it has positive benefits. So there's reasons we want to do it, and it can help us modulate our stress response.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots and lots of different types, and they're going to be unique to the person. So one of the things that we know is that how we respond and interpret a stressor will often impact how intensely or severely it affects us. So the mindset that we have around stress will impact how we perceive it. And when we have a more positive mindset, it can actually be a tool to buffer against stress and have it feel, more like an opportunity for growth than like this really big, bad, scary thing that's happening to us.
Yeah, the perception, right? Like how do you see the thing? Do you find though that some people just naturally tend to have more sensitive nervous system and they tend to like catastrophize, and for them it's more natural to see the dark side of it versus like somebody's like so kind of growth minded and growth oriented sees like the opportunity, like a positive opportunity. So what does that depend on?
Yeah, our constitution is definitely, I feel like there's different elements. So there's the constitution that we're born with, where, they might say people have a more the higher on the neurotic spectrum, where people might naturally tend more to be anxious. You might have people who are just more naturally sensitive or empathic. So they're going to be much more sensitive to the stressors, both for themselves and that are impacting people around them. And then we'll just see also how environment can impact us. So the way that we're raised, the way our parents respond to stress, the way that our loved ones respond to stress, all of that will also impact how we respond to it. And so some of it is learned and can be changed. But I really believe that even if you are a highly sensitive person, even if you had parents and you never really were taught how to deal with stress, it is something that I believe everyone can become more resilient to the stressors we'll inevitably encounter. Some of us will always be more sensitive and may need, like I consider myself in that boat. So I feel like I have a very sensitive nervous system. So I know that when I go through big transitions or big changes, I'm probably going to need more buffer time. I'm probably going to need more time alone, more time to decompress. And I think a big part of just honoring who we really are is like owning that and just saying, it's okay. It's not bad. We don't need to make ourselves wrong for it. And then some people are just naturally going to be more resilient to it. And kind of those people that just seem to like shake off whatever comes their way. And so there's a whole range of how we all respond to stress.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that, being more sensitive and taking things more kind of, I don't know, things feel more intense than they would feel for somebody else. And you said that everybody can become a little bit more resilient though. Although like the deep core, you will still I feel like the way you were born, I don't know if you can like totally completely change that. I don't know if that's possible. What do you think?
I don't think it's necessarily about changing the core of who we are when we're born, but it's more that we can set up our lives to really work more with who we are and just own it so that our lives are less stressful. Like if you are if you are a more sensitive person, right, you can build routines and structures and make conscious choices so that you feel generally resilient. And so I do think we can become more resilient with time.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Sometime earlier this year, I actually went to see like an intuitive healer, and then he puts like his hands on me. He's like, "Whoa, you were such an like empath and like highly sensitive and all that." And for me, it was like I wanted to almost like protest, like, "No, I'm not." It's as if it's something bad. But he's like, don't push it away. Actually, like when you look inside, you probably see that you are, and it's nothing to be like ashamed of. And then he recommended me a couple of books and things, and I started reading, and then I realized that it doesn't have to be like a bad thing. It's just how do you learn to live in a way that you feel better, and then make those little subtle changes that you need to make for your own well-being. It's not like that big of a deal, but for me at first it felt like, oh my goodness, I have this like label of me now, and I don't want to be weak.
I relate to that so much. And I think so much of like the earlier part of my life, I also rejected the part of myself that was sensitive. And it caused a lot more both suffering and stress for me because I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to be like my more extroverted friends who could just go kind of 24/7 and be social every night of the week. And I was just burning out because it wasn't authentic to who I am. And I think as we can really accept ourselves and just say, I am introverted, or I am really sensitive, or I am going to be impacted even by things like the news, and being able to control how much we take in and then how we care for ourselves. It's like, to me, that is so much of what actual self-love is. It's just being like, this is just how it is. And I need to work with myself and how I came into this planet.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you resonate, but Do you ever take like bathroom breaks even without needing them? If you're like at a big party and there's like a crowd and like, I gotta get out, I gotta go to the bathroom, just sit there for 2 minutes and then go back and be fine again. You know, that type of stuff.
Bathroom breaks, visiting with the pet on that is there, you know, where you kind of get down on the floor, you're away from other people,
Yes.
stepping outside, going to get things from my car, pretending to take a phone
Oh
call.
my God.
I will do all of those things if I'm in a really big place with a lot of people and I just need a minute and it can kind of help me fill back up and then go back in.
Oh my goodness, exactly. I feel like my whole personality is rebuilt now. exactly the same way. I'm like, yeah, I just need a minute outside. I don't know what I'm doing there. I just have to get out. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, it's just something to accept and not think that is abnormal. But I feel like in our society, I think those like very extroverted people, they just you know, they say that like who's louder wins, right? Like you're louder, you are more like, you show up more like with a seemingly a lot of positive energy. So that's kind of like maybe more appreciated in our society. What do you think? Is that true?
I think our society rewards the extroverts a little bit more. There is a little bit more for the go-getters, the people who are going to talk the most in the meeting, the people who put themselves out there, who have the energy to do that. There is a bit more reward perhaps for people like that. But I do think that more and more, you know, like I identify as an introvert and there is so much more, you know, there's more room for all of us to shine, I think, in the ways that we are, you know, naturally built.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably a little more natural, like natural bias for the extrovert.
Yeah, I feel that way too. But we don't want to become like, you know, be like, oh, I'm a victim of this. Like the victim mentality doesn't help anybody. You know, we don't have to think about it this way. So you actually mentioned self-love already for a second, and I wanted to talk about one of your really good Instagram posts, in my opinion, where you talked about like what, in your opinion, what are the things that are wrong with our self-love movement. So can you go over that a little bit?
Or that post that you just referenced, I think was the most successful thing I ever put up, and I had no idea that it was going to resonate with people. So essentially in the post, it was inspired by the experience I had going through my 20s, where I think many women can relate to this. But essentially I had bought into this story that I didn't love myself, and that most of the problems that I had were because I didn't love myself. And so anytime I felt low self-confidence, or I struggled with my body image, or I had self-doubt, or I was in a relationship with someone maybe who didn't treat me really well, I had this idea like, well, I must be lacking in self-love, so I have to go look for it. So I you know, read all the self-help books. I was doing all the things I possibly could, trying to like get this thing called self-love. And all that ever happened is I felt like it was reinforcing more of feeling less than. Like the more I looked for it, the less I was finding it, and the more I doubted myself, and the more I had this idea that it was something outside of me. And so I remember very vividly, you know, I had this boyfriend in my 20s who kind of teased me about all the self-help books I was reading, and I just had this moment of saying, you know, I don't actually feel broken. And I need to put this down, and I need to just stop trying to seek this thing outside of me, because the more I was trying to become this perfect woman who was, you know, always confident and always loving myself, I just felt more far away from that. And, you know, so much now of what I relate to and how I would work with other women who come in to see me is really about acknowledging the worth that we're all inherently born with, and that it's actually really normal to have times when we feel very confident and less confident. It's normal to feel high self-trust and more doubt. It's normal to feel like we can love ourselves and still have times that we don't like ourselves, or this idea that if I want to change myself, like I don't think the desire to lose weight inherently means you hate your body. It could just mean you want better health, or maybe you want to change something like, and so really adopting this idea that self-love just like how we love a pet or a child or our partner, is something that ebbs and flows. It's something that will have strong feelings of sometimes and less feelings of sometimes. We may even have moments where we feel like we don't like ourselves, but it doesn't mean we're not worthy or we don't love ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to really drop into a place of just accepting ourselves, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, of, honoring our sensitivity, honoring the parts of ourselves that feel less worthy sometimes, that might need a little more tender love and care, and being able to show up just as who we are, and not have it be this thing where we're seeking to have a level of perfection with, but
Mm-hmm.
instead just something that can just be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So do you feel like, you see all the posts on social media that, self-love should look a certain way? Do you think that that's kind of what makes people think that I'm not good enough if my self-love doesn't look exactly this way? Is that the issue?
Certainly on social media, some of those conversations reinforce more of the negative than the positive, but there also is good stuff out there. I think social media can feel really complicated because kind of everything is out there, but certainly there's a lot that I think reinforces this idea that if you don't feel confident 24/7, then you must need to buy a $10,000 coaching package for someone to teach you how to love yourself. And I don't think that's true at all.
Hmm. Yeah. And all that, again, coming back to stress, it just creates a lot of stress, right? I think social media actually creates a lot of stress, especially in those who are more sensitive and are maybe, thinking that always that there's something wrong with them. And then you almost like get reassurance from like scrolling and seeing that, yeah, okay, yeah, there is something wrong with me. There is definitely something wrong with me. So what are some of the tools that you would recommend to just starting to kind of, um, you know, feel a little bit more comfortable and then also reducing some of that stress?
Yeah. For starting to feel more comfortable in your skin, for starting to feel higher self worth, more self love, less stress, I do think these things often go together. I would say two things. Like, one is really finding ways that you can be with yourself fully. So, that is where meditation and mindfulness can be really, really powerful. Of, can we just sit with ourselves with nothing else? Because most people find it intolerable. I know I felt like I was going to jump out of my skin the first time I said, I'm going to sit here just for 10 minutes and just be in my body and breathe. So meditation can be a really powerful like first entry. And can we just be with ourselves? Can we just let ourselves be as we are right now? And there's lots of other ways we can get into our bodies. So I feel like anything where we're working with our breath, where we are exercising, where we are just leisure walking, getting grounded. So, feeling the sun on our skin, getting our feet on the earth. Those really natural practices can be so helpful. I know you're into cold water therapy. I think that can be an awesome way just to feel alive and get back into our bodies for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, doing things where we feel a sense of awe can help us get outside of ourselves and feel more connected to something greater, which can inherently help us feel both less stressed and just a deeper sense of self and being part of something greater. So that's where I would think about getting into nature, because when we can feel awe in nature, a lot of times it's actually been shown to reduce stress and increase our happy hormones like serotonin.
Yeah.
And then also connecting with other people where we feel that sense of awe, of like being with a child or being with a pet or feeling like we just are connecting with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Those can be really powerful ways to reduce stress and feel more comfortable just in being who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to just be there and sit with yourself, right? So I just recently heard about a study that they did. I don't remember which university it was, but they did a study where they invited like a group of people to sit in a lab for like 15 minutes and do nothing, right? And then of course, like almost nobody could do that. So everybody, after a little while, like pulled out their phones and then started checking Instagrams or whatever they did, and then then they thought, okay, this was too hard. Maybe it was the environment. Maybe it was the lab environment that was kind of stressful for people. Why don't we let them do this at home? And the results actually were not different. So it wasn't like the environment thing. And then the final step of the study was that they actually started giving people tiny little electric shocks every time they moved or did something. And then there was this one guy who I think it was 15 minutes, like shocked himself like over 100 times because he couldn't sit still. So he would have to like pull out his phone and do something like to distract him. So the need to distract is like really huge. And I think if we all counted like how many times we pull out the phone during the day, that's a high number. And that's like that's something we could train and get better at. Like, okay, it's just, I don't feel comfortable right now. Instead of like trying to fix that by grabbing my phone, can I just see what's going on? Why do I feel the need to distract myself?
Exactly. What you just said, I think, is so true around meditation. And one of the things I often recommend to people is using some sort of external support if you do want to get started. So there are a lot of free resources. I mean, I know even here in Portland, there are, dozens of free groups where you can go and learn how to meditate. And I think it's a lot like exercise, where if you've never exercised, and you decide you're going to go for a run, you may not get very far because it's going to be hard and you're going to hit this like place pretty quickly, where if you hire a trainer or you go to just a group exercise class, you're probably going to do okay. Because even though you'll still be a beginner and it'll still be hard, you're going to have this outside support of finding ways that you can modify it. And the power of the group of just, you've committed to yourself that you're going to do something with this other group of people. I think meditation can be a lot like that if you're curious about starting it, where if you can either be with a group of people or try an app. There's a lot of really great apps. I like the Calm app. I like Headspace. There's some awesome teachers out there like Tara Brock where they have free resources. And so listening to something guided can often be a lot less uncomfortable than just trying to sit silently before you've built up the tools and have the skills to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be this silent thing for 30 minutes. If you can, that's amazing, but it doesn't have to look like that, especially for a beginner.
Yeah, exactly. But I like what you said too around our compulsion to pick up our phone, or I think most of us have little tics like that where we're compulsively doing things almost before we even realize it. I think the phone is a great one because it's a little way that we get dopamine. And so every time we open Instagram, we get that little hit of dopamine. So it feels really good. So a lot of times when I work with people, we will just practice not necessarily like trying to like willpower to never pick up our phone, but just when you pick it up, just stop for one second and say like, what's going on right now? And usually there's a really clear like, wow, I just felt really anxious at work, or this really stressful thing just happened, or I'm trying to like get away from something. And often we can still look at the phone. Like it's not like a terrible thing to do, but just to slow it down and say, ooh, actually I'm really stressed. And maybe there'd be a better thing I could do. Maybe I should just make a cup of tea or like take a 5-minute walk or call somebody. And maybe there's a healthier way to deal with what's coming up right now that feels so uncomfortable.
Absolutely. It's so true. I've definitely also reduced the checking the phone all the time, because it's also another thing. It's just like a stimulus overload, right? So if you are a little bit more sensitive, then everything, like too much noise, too much light, too much of like any stimulus like that will kind of put your brain in a little bit and your nervous system on an overdrive again. So we're just like adding and adding and adding to already overstimulated state, I feel like. So like I like your recommendations. Maybe go outside for a walk or do something different that's a little bit more calming in nature. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to also add doing something different. Or I had a therapist give this recommendation to someone once, and I thought it was so brilliant. I share it with people. So another thing you can do is actually set a timer. So like turn your timer on for 15 minutes, open your social media app of choice, and truly feel into what you're feeling as you look at the app. Are you bored? Are you looking for stimulation? Like really be mindful of like, how do I feel when I'm on the app? And don't let yourself stop. Like you have to use it for a full 15 minutes. And it can be amazing what we learn about ourselves. Because usually people have an app of choice, like maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's YouTube or Twitter, but like really be on the app for a full 15 minutes and see how you feel at the end of it and what's coming up for you while you're on it, and trying to use it more like consciously. So use it every day for 15 minutes with the timer versus just every time I feel stressed, I scroll for 30 seconds. It can be very insightful.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's definitely a good one. So do you feel like people sometimes have this perception that, okay, I'm working on my stress now and I should be 100% free of that eventually? And that, let me go do this now. Do you ever see that?
Absolutely. People have this idea that they'll either be completely, I think we have it with everything with stress. Maybe we're going to get to zero stress, zero pain, absolutely perfect health. When in reality, all of these things are going to be evolving, right? So stress is any external demand that's coming into our system. So it's not realistic. Like there's life is always going to be changing. There's always going to be things coming into our reality. Just the same with our health. We might get to a place where you overcome something. Maybe you struggled with chronic migraines and you don't get them anymore, and that's amazing. But your health is going to keep evolving. Maybe you'll get, things can happen and we can reach a place where we are generally very healthy, very resilient, but it's still something that will change with time because the input isn't static. We still age, we still go through life, we still have things change. And so it's absolutely a myth to think that we're going to have perfect health 100% of the time or zero stress. And I honestly don't know if we would like it. I almost wonder if it might be a little bit boring if you've ever had that feeling of just no stress at all. There sometimes is this feeling of uneasiness of, is there something about to happen? Like there's no stress right now. So I think it's always evolving.
Yeah, I don't think I know anybody who actually doesn't have any stress. Well, actually, just the other day I was talking about it with Hugh, my husband, and I was like, do you think like maybe just like monks in a monastery, maybe they don't have? But he said, no, I think they have stress too because they're waiting to be enlightened, and not all of them are yet. And so, like, yeah, they probably even have some stress. So I think that's as close as you can probably get to like non-stress. But us everyday people. Again, like, a lot of us are very perfectionistic. We think we gotta have it all. And, and then we feel like, oh, I let myself down because I wasn't able to become stress-free 100%. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
So we already talked about a couple of techniques that you teach to your clients. Do you see like that sometimes people are looking for like novelty? They want to try the next new technique or something like that versus like figuring out, doing something in the long run to see if maybe this is going to work. Are they seeking for new and novelty?
I do see a lot in my practice that people will come in really trying to do, and I totally understand it. They're trying to do their absolute best. And so a lot of times it's something they've heard about that seems really cool. So maybe they're doing a specific kind of diet, like right now the keto diet's really trendy, or they're doing a type of exercise. But a lot of times there's something really big missing. So I'll see this novelty where people are taking a dozen different supplements, they're eating this really specific kind of diet, but they don't exercise, they don't sleep, they work 18 hours a day, and there's just no balance really in like what they're doing. And I'm sure you see this with fitness as well, because I see it where people come in and they're doing, CrossFit once a week, but they never take walks, and their, diet is all over the place. And in reality, I think the things that keep our stress low and our health high tend to be really simple. And so sometimes it can feel almost too simple to say, I want you to sleep and we're going to prioritize that above all else. And I want you to take walks every day. And it's like, well, walking, that's not, do I need to pay a trainer to tell me to take walks? That kind of thing. Or I need to eat enough protein and make sure I eat a high fiber diet. Like, I think a lot of times the people who become very popular in the health movements are just saying something counter to the narrative. Like, keto is counter the narrative of eating high fiber, high plant rich diet.
Yeah.
But in reality, those things that are the most evidence-based actually can be very, very effective. They're just simple. They're not sexy.
Yeah.
And so I totally understand why we're all seeking for that novelty. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like when I think of my own healing, I feel like it was 90% simple consistency. And then there was maybe 10% of more magic and novelty of things that I never would have thought of. But the foundation was in walking, weight training, eating regular meals, getting lots of vegetables, eating enough protein, sleeping 8 hours a night. Like there was no supplement or juice cleanse or, special diet that could outperform those basic things that are so often missing.
Yeah, it's so simple like that. It's almost like, is it really going to work?
Right.
Like you just want me to do these things. I can do them on my own. Like, yeah, you can.
But I have compassion because just because they're simple doesn't mean they're easy. Like we have $1 billion diet industry when most people know that what we need to do is create some sort of calorie deficit if they want to lose weight. But we have our internal blocks and mindset issues and blind spots that make it really hard to do that. And so I really do think there is a place like where we need doctors and health coaches and trainers because I see it for myself and with the clients that I work with, like we need support and accountability, even if these things are supposedly simple. Like we may feel way too busy to take walks and we may feel way too busy or like sleep is hard. Like we don't get good quality sleep. And so we do need outside support a lot of the times, even if these things are simple and free.
Yeah. And also so that they don't jump to that next shiny object, right? Because that's also, somebody mentioned carnivore. Oh, I'm going to do that. So now if you have a coach or, somebody who can tell you that, no, let's have some vegetables too, because there are very many benefits to eating vegetables too. Again, not saying that nobody should ever do carnivore. Maybe you want to try, experiment, whatever, but it's not going to be like the next or like the missing piece of everything that's now all of a sudden like will solve all the issues in the world. It's not like that. So yeah, I agree that sometimes a coach or trainer can really help you to stay the course. Don't start doing things that is not necessary at all.
And even if you want to try that novel thing, do it with somebody who can hold you accountable to it, because so often I think we jump ship before we've really gotten the results, because it can be really hard to have faith, because no matter what we're doing, whether it's something very boring or very hard and interesting, it still takes time a lot of times to really see results. And it can be helpful to have someone reflect back to us. I mean, so often people come into my office and they're like 50% better. Like they're doing great. And they come in and they're like, I'm terrible and nothing's better. And I am having such a hard time. And I'll just look back at my notes and I'll say, well, last month you said you were only sleeping 4 hours a night and you slept 7 every day this month. They're like, oh yeah, that's actually true. And I'll say, oh, and you got like 8 migraines last month. And this month you said you only had 1. Like, oh yeah, that's true. And so often just having someone there to reflect back to us our progress can be so helpful.
What is it then that they don't see their progress? Do they measure it differently? Do they want to see something else? How come they don't see? Because the things that you mentioned, they're huge.
Right. I feel like we are so often we have a negative bias, or we're still focused on where we want to get to, because we have this idea of perfect and we know where we want to go and we can have big goals. And I think sometimes it can just be easy to miss the smaller wins along the way, where if we still feel tired, it can be easy to forget that we actually are getting more sleep and we just still have to keep going to like get all the way there. And some people are I think that's where we come back to how we're wired, where some of us are just naturally a bit more negatively wired, where we're worried about what's not right yet or what's wrong. And then some of us are going to have much more of a positive mindset where it's like, oh, it's going great. I'm so much better. It just depends on the person.
Yeah. I years ago, I think 2019, I learned a really good tip from somebody. So we're at a retreat in Costa Rica, did some plant medicine there. And then there was some, speakers. And then they had all kinds of like interesting mindset tools and things. And so I also tend to be somebody who's more like, seeing the dark side. It's just like naturally how I am. But then what she taught us, and I'm still doing this to this day. Actually, today I did this too. Was that if something really good happens, let's say that you have the opportunity to work with somebody, like this is your ideal client, and they sign up for your program. And every time when that happens, I say thank you and more, please. So this is like a golden thing for me, because that way you see the positive instead of like, just one, like I just only one new client this month. That sucks, right? Instead of that, like I'm gonna say thank you and more, please. And I attract more of that stuff, and I remember to appreciate, because I also like how one of my previous coaches, Danny J, says that if you can't be like faithful with like small things or like appreciate that 1%, how do you expect to have more abundance in your life and have more of those clients that are ideal and perfect and who you want to serve, and kind of, all that to kind of like emphasize more of the positive mindset instead of like the lack, like the things that I don't have, the clients that I don't have, the money that I don't have. That doesn't really, even if your brain wants to go there naturally, it's not nurturing you.
I think that is such a powerful tool for just happiness, and when we're trying to manifest something. Like I love that. I'm going to try that. Thank you and more.
Thank you and more, please. Yeah.
Yeah, because it forces us to be really present to the little wins along the way. Yeah, and it's sort of like when you make your first like $300, it could be easy to say, look, that's not going to pay my rent, but it's also like, well, thank you for $300. Like, thank you and more. You can't get to the 10,000 months without earning your first $300. Exactly. So I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about movement too. We talked a little bit about walking. You mentioned weightlifting too. So what role does movement have to our mental health and well-being?
So movement and exercise is probably the most powerful, accessible, and helpful thing we can do, just both for mental health, resiliency to stress, and then our overall well-being. So, and I feel like it's very underutilized.
Yes.
And so we know that exercise, both moderate intensity aerobic exercise and resistance training, are very effective for mental health. And so they increase serotonin levels. They increase something called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which it's one of those things that shows up in the research where most mental illnesses, whether you're talking about obsessive compulsive disorder or major depressive disorder, you're going to see low levels of this BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And so exercise helps to increase that. Exercise is also going to be helpful for reducing inflammation, and it increases blood flow to the brain, so it's really good for our cognitive health. And then it also increases self-esteem. There's this feeling of, ooh, I did something. And I think everyone can relate to feeling like, I don't feel like exercising, I'm not in a good mood. And then you do it, and you can have that immediate win of saying, ooh, I really showed up for myself today. And that feels really good. And so exercise is going to release endorphins, and then it also reduces anxiety, reduces depression. It can significantly improve sleep quality, which then I think has this whole cascade of other benefits for both our mental and physical health. And it also helps to regulate our key stress hormones, which are cortisol and adrenaline. And so I feel like exercise can be so awesome. It has been shown in some studies to be as effective as antidepressants. The only caveat I say with exercise is for anyone who's listening who is in a hard place, who maybe is really depressed and is in more of a place where you're feeling like, gosh, it's hard for me to even get out of bed, and you're telling me I need to like go for a 45-minute walk. Sometimes it's not the first line therapy. Like sometimes we do need medication. Sometimes we do need something to get over that initial place where if you're in a really depressed place, it can be very hard to start something new like exercise. Or if you're in a lot of pain or you physically are just not really able, I still want everyone to have a movement practice at some time, but it's not always the appropriate first line. And so that's where working with a healthcare provider can be helpful. But for people who are resourced and are able, I love exercise. And even knowing, in Oregon right now, we have a shortage of accessibility to mental health crises. Like even where, sorry, we have a shortage of mental health practitioners, so it's leading
Yep.
to a crisis. And so if you're on a 12-week wait list to get in to see a therapist, I would recommend starting with exercise. Like there are things we can do even if you're implementing the more conventional healing tools like therapy and medication. So I'm just such an advocate for getting moving, and it doesn't have to be complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that so much. And like you said, sometimes it's been even shown to be as good or if not better than medication,
Yeah.
which is so true. Like I'm always going to be a fan of all the modalities where we can get better without putting anything external into our body. And I understand that sometimes there is a time and place for it, but it's not always. It's not nearly as often as I think that people think, like, oh, just give me that thing or give me that pill. And again, I don't want to judge anybody. I'm not judging anybody who has to use these tools, but have we tried the most natural things first? Have we moved our body? Are we drinking enough water? Are we getting enough sunshine? The stuff that is free, that is not messing with your body, it just cannot mess with your body. It cannot be harmful for you, right? Versus a lot of medication have effects. I don't even want to call them side effects. They're just effects, right? So why not to try the most natural things first?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really see within, I call myself an integrative medicine practitioner because I am always going to lean on the holistic modalities, but I do use conventional as well when they're appropriate and needed.
Yeah.
But so if we give someone a pill for, let's say, anxiety, it may make the anxiety go down, but that's not the same thing as feeling really awesome every day. It's not the same
Yes.
thing as feeling vibrant and alive and joyful. And so, even if the pill is necessary, I often feel like we still need things like healthy diet and exercise because the absence of anxiety is not feeling vibrant and
Mm-hmm.
feeling amazing. And things like exercise do make us feel alive and accomplished and powerful. And it can really increase self-esteem and self-efficacy. And just when we get our blood flowing, we get our lymph flowing, we're going to have better digestion, better sleep, all the things that have us say like, ooh, I feel awesome today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm such an advocate for really including the lifestyle, no matter what we choose, whether we're doing medication or not, because I want everybody to feel awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to just say, oh, I'm not depressed anymore, but I still
Exactly.
feel just kind of like, I want people to feel awesome. And so that's where I think that exercise and meditation and, doing sauna and cold plunges and all those things and getting into nature can have us really feeling good every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so awesome. And most of these things are free. They don't
Mm-hmm.
cost you anything, and they are easily accessible. Like everybody can go outside. Things like, oh, it's too cold outside. I'm sure you got some clothes.
Yeah.
That's. And also, I feel like with medication, it's almost like taking away the personal responsibility. Maybe I'm sounding like too harsh or whatever, but I feel like we have to have personal responsibility, right? Like it's up to me. It's not only my healthcare practitioner prescribing me that thing, and I'm going to put the responsibility on her or him, right? You give me that thing, I'll take that. Right? That's my only job to take that, but it's also your job to get outside and to move and to do these other things. I just recently I talked to one of my clients who said that the entire last year, this was the time when she gained a lot of weight because she was stuck at home, obviously, like many of us were. And then she said, yeah, so literally like looking at my computer all day long. And then the rest of the day I was sitting in front of the TV. We already talked about news too, right? How that can really put our nervous system on like high alert. So this is a perfect example of why we're getting anxious and depressed, right? And then, she didn't go out too much and, didn't see the family, all that kind of stuff. So now that we just started introducing walking, and then, starting June, she's been walking and then lifting some weights a couple of times a week at home. And she's like, my energy is so different now. I want to do things. I'm looking forward to my walks. It's so much better now. And again, it's just basically that one thing that we changed.
I feel like what on an energetic level, so much of what we're talking about is, you know, not being in a stagnation. Like if you just think about our blood just like needing to flow, or just like being really sedentary, when we can get into a place where we're, you know, we are moving and our blood is flowing. I think it's
Yeah.
why those things do tend to feel good ultimately, even if like, you know, sauna, cold therapy, exercise, they may not feel good right when you first get started or in the moment every time, but the end result is the endorphins and the serotonin and feeling, you know, you get the good feelings afterwards. But
Mhm.
in, you know, kind of to be more spiritual with it, we need that feeling of energy moving through our life to feel
Yeah.
happy and to feel like we're working towards something. And
Yeah.
so sometimes starting with exercise can be the simplest thing that we do to feel powerful in our daily life. It's something you can say, like, I'm going to do something that's hard and
Mhm.
I can do that, you know, and it can
Mhm.
be the simplest thing to start to build, you know, more of an empowered feeling and more confidence and like moving more into that like growth mindset of I'm capable of changing.
Mhm. Yeah, and like you said too, it's not always comfortable when you're doing it, but do it for the after feeling then. You know that there's a reward and it's going to be, I mean, that's the polarity, right? You gotta like go through something that sucks a little bit to get that good feeling, right? So
Yeah,
that's how it is with exercise. This is how it is with cold plunge. People say, I don't like the cold. I'm like, do you think anybody likes it when they get in? But they do it for the after feeling.
exactly. It's a way of modulating our stress response. You're
Mhm.
purposefully doing something that's
Yeah,
stressful so that, I mean, in many ways, it's a way to learn how to be in discomfort. I think that's one of the reasons that people recommend it so much. It's like, how can I learn how to regulate my breathing and calm myself down when I feel panicked? And so it can be a
exactly.
powerful tool.
Yes, yes, this is exactly how the cold exposure is. Like you almost like get mini training every time you go in, right? So now if in real life outside of that cold plunge tub, a situation occurs where you would typically panic or start like hyperventilating, now you have already practiced calming your breathing down and telling yourself that I am safe, and you get through this a lot easier than you did before you started that practice. So I think that's so spot on what you just said. So thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I'd also like to ask about sense of purpose, how much that matters for our mental well-being.
You know, having a sense of purpose, I don't know if you've ever heard Dan Buettner talk in the blue zones, but when they're looking at places in the world where people have the highest number of people who are living to over 100, there's really key things. And one of them is having a sense of meaning or purpose. And so there's research showing that people who have a sense of meaning have better well being, better mental health, and longer longevity. And so, you know, in many ways, I feel like it's anything that has us feeling like we matter. So it doesn't have to be this great existential, my life purpose, you know, of changing the world. But a lot of times it's just feeling like we need to be there for our families or we need to be there. You know, sometimes it's when someone gets a pet, they suddenly have they need to be there to take care of
Mhm.
this little animal, or having a job, being part of a community. It's one of the reasons that people who are part of religious organizations often have a greater sense of meaning and purpose, is because they both have a spiritual sense of meaning, but also they're part of a community where they actually show up and they have duties most of the time. And what often goes along with having a sense of purpose is, interestingly, what we talked about before, but that sense of awe.
Mhm.
So when we have a sense that we're part of something that really matters, we can feel awe more often, which has us present to the things greater than us, of being there for other people, of being part of a community, connection to something spiritual. And that tends to have us behave in ways that are more kind and more generous. We have better mental health because we have this awareness of other people and, you know, other people's suffering, because a lot of times when we're suffering the most, we'll be the most self-focused. It can feel like our lives are, you know, so difficult. It can be very difficult to connect with others and what others are going through, and that others might be having similar struggles.
Yeah.
And so both having meaning and purpose connects us to other people and can be very powerful for mental health. And I think it's one of the reasons people even talk about volunteering being so good for mental health, because you're doing something outside of yourself where you are connecting and making a contribution. You're needed to be there.
So what would you say to somebody who is maybe in a like a really low, poor mental state and, doesn't want to go anywhere, doesn't want to leave the house, doesn't want to talk to anybody. Now you're telling them, start volunteering. But like, hell no, I'm not going to leave my house. So how would somebody like that get started?
I would start as small as possible. I would start as small as possible. Like maybe it's as simple as texting a friend saying like, I was thinking of you and I just wanted you to know that your friendship really means something to me. So finding sense of purpose in something really small like your friendships, or, taking a moment to perhaps do a gratitude practice of finding things in your life that you're grateful for, to be able to start seeing that your presence does matter at your job or in your family. And I know a lot of times any of those things can be very triggering, and there's always going to be, someone for whom their family was very triggering. And so it's not going to be where they find purpose, or maybe they're feeling disconnected from friends. But, finding the thing where you do feel, this really means something to me. This is where I really matter. Maybe it is connecting with animals. Like sometimes that's the simplest place where we might feel disconnected from other humans, but we can feel like, gosh, if I could just treat myself, if I could love myself the way my dog loves me, it can be so pure. And, I know the energy isn't always there for bigger things, but maybe it's offering to, when you go to the grocery store, ask your elderly neighbor, hey, I'm at the store, like, can I pick up anything for you? Starting really small with acts of kindness and generosity can begin to increase that feeling of, that I matter, that I'm good, that I'm doing something that's meaningful in the world.
Yeah, I think everybody needs a little bit of that, right?
I think we all need more of it.
Yeah, to feel like not necessarily needed. That sounds like maybe a little too strong, but be able to help somebody, right? That's a really good feeling. So, how would you help somebody who, if there's anybody who has a person in their life who's going through very stressful time? How can we help? I think sometimes, and that's just like how I see it. I think sometimes people say things like, "Oh, don't be so sad," or "It's okay," like things that actually are not maybe that great. If you're telling somebody don't be so sad, you're essentially telling them to suppress your feelings. What are some better things to say or do, or how do you show up for somebody who's going through a difficult time?
I just laughed when you said that, because I think we've all heard it. And it's like when you tell someone, like, well, just relax, it's like,
Sure.
I am not feeling relaxed right now. So when we're with someone who's going through a really hard time, the best thing we can often do is just to really acknowledge it. And so sometimes saying like, wow, it sounds like you're really going through a lot right now. Is there anything that I could do that would be helpful? Sometimes it's just offering, could I come by and bring you dinner, or would you like to get together for a walk? Or if you want to talk, I'm happy to listen. Sometimes it's just offering our presence and validating what they're experiencing instead of trying to make it go away. As humans, we so often want to take people's pain away. We want to fix it. We want to make it better. And instead holding it as, this is theirs to go through. I don't know what they need from it, but I love them and I'm going to just validate it and offer my support, however that looks. And maybe they don't really need support right now, and that's okay too. But just offering your presence and kindness can go so far.
Do you think that sometimes just listening is enough and without necessarily giving advice?
I think just physically being there can go so far. I know, I went through a really difficult experience where my mom passed away about 4 years ago. And it was really interesting seeing what mattered to me when the way people showed up, and just having people reach out made a difference. Like literally having a friend, I had a friend who would text me maybe every 2 weeks and say, I'm going to get frozen yogurt tonight. Would you like to come?
Mm-hmm.
And just the like regular reaching out it made me feel so much less alone.
Yeah.
And, you know, just knowing there's people there who can witness us, who can be there, who can hold space for us, whether they're even listening. I mean, sometimes it can be great to have someone listen or to cry on their shoulder. But I think even just physically knowing that somebody is there can change everything in how you experience going through a hard time. And so my advice now when if anyone asks me, like, I have a friend going through this hard thing, how can I show up? I'd say just be there, just make tangible offers. Instead of saying, let me know if there's anything I can do, offer food, offer connection, offer, a phone call. That can go so far.
Yeah, that's good to know. Well, thank you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, but you feel like would be important to add regarding, all the topics that we covered today?
I think we've covered everything. I don't think that I have anything else to add now.
Okay, so do you have any offerings, any programs, any free resources that you would like to share with our audience?
Sure. So for anyone who wants to connect or see more about my work or what I do, you can find my website at Dr. Laura Gouge, LauraGouge.com. That's where I'm on all social. So Instagram at Dr. Laura Gouge, Facebook. And on my Instagram or my website, you can get my free anti-anxiety playbook. So it's my top 10 strategies that I've used in clinical practice to help people who are dealing with anxiety. Huge overlap for anxiety and stress. So I'd say if you're going through stress, the anti-anxiety playbook would also be for you. I also have a free guide for 4 weeks to better sleep. So it's called the Good Week Starter Kit. Because I know that sleep is elusive for so many people. And yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram if you want to connect there. My DMs are open. So I love connecting with people. And so, yeah, you get the free downloads there on my website.
Yeah, definitely follow Laura on Instagram because you have those really good, like, kind of bite-sized little squares that you post that are, you just look at it and you're like, oh yeah, like exactly. Yeah, I've had it so many times, like, yes, sharing, this is exactly what I needed,
Thank you.
They're just so clear and so on point and no BS, no like kind of trying to, I don't know, make things fancier. You're like very, how would I say, very practical. I think very practical and very on point. So I love everything that you do. So thank you so much for that and for being here today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Kirsten. It was really a pleasure to talk to you today.
Same. See you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.